All right. Hello, everybody. It's Doug from AR.Watch, and you are here for another amazing night of AR101. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Chattanooga Epic Adventure Race that was last weekend, hosted by Warrior Racing and directed by the one and only Jim Farmer. So we are excited to have different people here for the race. We might have some people that are joining us in a little bit. But right now, I want to kick it over to Jeff to talk about all the new things that are happening in the coming months with Warrior.
Well, it's the first quarter is almost over. It is over actually, and so we got through C2C, which is always the big hurdle. Omar was a great event. Chattanooga this last weekend was so spectacular. So many good things to talk about tonight. The 28th. Now, if you think about 28 years ago, the Blue Ridge Adventure Race started. That's insane to think about. It's been 28 years. It is by far the longest consecutive running adventure race in the world. And that's been verified by every other race director that we know worldwide, saying that is the longest consecutive, meaning it's never skipped a year. We almost lost it in 2020 because the city said there's no way you're bringing people downtown. We found private property. We made it happen. So consecutive 28 years. Can't wait for the 30th year, which will be coming up. But again, we have a paddle start this year, so that's limited the boats, limited entry. We will definitely sell out. We're going to be paddling down, of course, the only river that we have in Blue Ridge, except for when we go further out. So that's a guess of where we're going to start, but it will definitely be a paddle start. Great design so far, and everything's been 100% approved, so we're A-okay with that race there. We lead into some ultra and Fort Yargo. If you're into running and want to come up to Fort Yargo, great location for a 50K or a 25K there. Then we've got to go to the first ever Hogback, where we're going to have two races on the same weekend with a gap in between. So we have a 10-hour on one day or a 12-hour on one day and an 8 on the next. You can do one or the other. You can do both. It's an adventure racing weekend. Again, we rented out the entire YMCA for that location. So we have cabins available, camping available, and a giant lodge that we've rented out completely that houses about 40 people. So take a look at that. From there, we head off to the Alaska, and then we've come back to do the Bear. And again, we do Colorado once again. So we have a busy summer coming up, but we're going to probably be leaving here right after the Hogback and heading out west and heading out to Alaska. The rest of the year, we're still working on the calendar. We have the Cauldron dates are already there, as well as the Turkey Burn, which will be in Thanksgiving Day weekend. So that will be down in Florida, and that's going to be a great location. Jared Shoemaker is our designer for that course. And so that's going to kind of wrap up the rest of the year, and off to you, Doug, with this AR101 about Chattanooga Epic.
Well, first, hold on. I want to touch base on, you just opened up last week for C2C, and I want to talk about how many teams are already signed up for C2C for next year.
Well, for some reason, everybody likes these hoodies. And so we had 30 teams in about a day and a half sign up. So,
guys, it's going to sell out. Do not wait. You want to be
there. Wait, don't let the price go up. I have so many people that a week or two or a month after, they're like, oh my gosh, you didn't realize the price was going up. The price goes up the closer we get to the race. So watch those dates.
Yeah, get that early bird pricing in while you can, because it's already expensive enough, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we had a couple of people join us while we were waiting for Jeff to finish telling us about everything that's going on. So I want to go around. I want you to just introduce yourself, say who you are, say what team you are, and what distance of the race that you did, because there was a 30-hour and a 10-hour for the race last weekend. So let's start with Jim first. Well, you're on this side of me in the thing, but I don't know where you show up in Facebook. So Jim, you go first.
Hey, Jim Farmer. By the way, I'm not race director. Jeff is the race director and race promoter and all those things. So I'm technically the course designer, although I think Jeff could tell you I tend to try to take over as many aspects of it as possible, the permitting and everything else. And the distance I did was probably about 8 months. I think we, the last year we had the 48-hour race in June. And I started pretty much planning this race right after that. So, about, I guess, 10 months of racing to get to this point. And it's a race to the start line. So that's but I usually race with my wife Susie, who is much smarter, faster, and better looking than me as Privateer Chattanooga. And we will be hitting up Blue Ridge and Hogback here coming up soon.
Excellent. Tim, tell us about yourself.
My name's Tim Hopkin. It was Team NCCX doing 30 hours. It was my return to adventure racing after over 20 years. So it was fun. It was successful. I brought a younger athlete who never done an adventure race. So we got to experience the joys of sleep deprivation and moving constantly for 30 hours. I did actually give him a 20-minute break.
That was kind of you. I don't know that anybody I've raced with gives me those kind of breaks. I usually have to just take them. Jason.
Jason White, F3 Hall Pass. I was one of the solos on the 30-hour race.
Awesome. Mr. Hand.
All right, Johnny Hand. I raced as the Squid for my former Navy days, and I was a solo racer on the 30 hours.
Awesome. Brad. You're busy working out, Brad. Like I just don't get it. Did you not get enough last weekend?
It's raining outside and I had to do intervals. So, and I had got a late start. 10-hour motor mile racing, first adventure race. Other than, I think, if you count Farmer, where your sprints about 10, 15 years ago, I guess those count too, don't they? So
that was a rinky-dink race back in the day, but yeah, I wouldn't call it quite the same, but we'll call it an adventure race.
first adventure race for my teammate and I. We were a two-man team.
Well, you're making us all look bad because you're working. I'm in my workout room, but this is what I do in there now.
Wow.
Nick.
Hey, what's going on? Nick Galbraith, and I raced team name Labona Capital Racing. I usually race with David Grabner, but it's my first solo race for the
Nice.
Chattanooga.
And
Yeah,
you did
incredible.
the 30 hours as a solo, right?
Yeah. I
Awesome.
raced alongside Jason, got a good bit of the race there. So super grateful for him and his nav skills, because I would have been one lost puppy in there if it was just me the whole time.
So what you're saying is that the focus after this is getting some orienteering in.
That's right.
Awesome.
I have a question for Tim. Tim, the hiatus of 20 years, what pulled you back? Would Jim Farmer just call you and pressure you? Or did you just go, hey, I used to like this, let's try it again?
I'd done a lot of other endurance racing, mostly on bicycles. So there was a heyday when I did a lot of adventure racing, basically shorter hours in Western North Carolina. Always thought about one of the Eco Challenge, but had a family and just thought I'd just get off the couch or get off my bicycle and go move around with a teammate who thought it was a good idea, or at least I convinced him it was a good idea. Well, he wasn't too sure. His mother kindly, he's a German friend of mine, and his mother wasn't too keen on me taking him on an adventure, and so she actually stayed up till over midnight in Germany to watch us finish and make sure I took her home home.
He's no worse for the wear, right? I mean, like, did he enjoy it?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he was talking about the next one.
Hey,
A quick aside is I messaged Tim. So I had never officially met Tim, but he was the cyclocross, NCCX is North Carolina cyclocross, and he has directed many of some of the biggest races in the country over in North Carolina that I've raced in back when I was a cyclocross racer, and I was the cyclocross director in Tennessee. So anyway, I messaged him. So we share. I didn't realize he was an adventure racer beforehand. So obviously, adventure racing and cyclocross have a lot in common, or something.
yeah, probably leads you well in, especially with this kind of race where there's a lot of elevation. But before we get to the elevation, because I know Jason will have some things to say about that, being a flatlander, let's talk about how this race started. So Jim, you want to tell us how it broke down first, and then we'll every leg, and then we'll just start with the 30. We'll start there.
Yeah, and the 30 and 10 kind of were on top of each other for the most part. The 10 we kind of added. I convinced Jeff to maybe get some locals like Brad that showed up to get some local interest in adventure racing, just because 30 and 48 hours, is a little intimidating to folks. So we decided to throw the 10 in there. So I was able to kind of coordinate those two together for the most part. Real quick, as I mentioned earlier, for me, it's a race to the start. So the race started on Friday at noon. Tuesday, we had to cancel the original paddle section because of the storms the week before. So we were supposed to bus people up to Dunlap, Tennessee in the Sequatchie Valley and paddle the Sequatchie River, which is stunning river, beautiful. Get out at Kettner's Mill, another beautiful place, and then head up into Prentice Cooper where the main part of the race was. Long story short, the storms the week before, 2 big blowdowns in the first 10 miles that completely dammed up the river, and we had to cancel that. We didn't have enough time to remove it. So essentially, I'm spending the 2 days prior to the race, rather than doing the things I should be doing, scrambling to find a new paddle section. We had a contingency plan, but I still had to deal with permitting. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, TWRA, were awesome in last minute sort of approving the use of the Bennett Lake boat ramp. So long story short, it was supposed to be a really scenic river paddle, Sequatchie River paddle. Unfortunately, we had to repeat a lot of what we did last year in the Tennessee River, which is still beautiful, but we had a depression, low pressure system come in after the rains on Tuesday. Temperatures were chilly. The hardest thing on the paddle was the wind. So we had a stiff headwind that Tim could tell you about and everybody else could tell you about in the last 5 miles. But we had to make lemonade. So long story short, the paddle ended up being a 21-mile paddle along the Tennessee River. They got out of there and then they headed up into Prentice Cooper State Forest and Wildlife Management Area. And those folks really took care of us up there. It's 25,000 acres of land up there, kind of high plateau forest, tons of rivers and gorges, lots of topography. And we're really blessed in Chattanooga. And part of the reason we're putting this race on is because we have so much land to play with, right around a mid-sized city of 250,000. So Prentice Cooper was the main segment of the race. They had a big long bike leg with a lot of climbing in it. It's unavoidable around here. If you look at the topography, it's just up, down, river or mountain is pretty much what you get. So a lot of up and down through that. And then the TA.
Hold on, Joe.
Sorry.
We'll get back to the
Okay.
longer sections, but let's talk about this paddle, guys. So, I mean, there were several solos in here, which, I mean, kayaking 22 miles by yourself is never fun, much less with a heavy headwind at the end. So let's talk about that first. Nick, tell me your take on that paddle, because if you're used to racing as a team and now you're a solo, how was that?
Yeah, it was quite adventurous. During the beginning of the paddle, I believe his name is Jake, and I were paddling in the back of the pack, and Jake's kayak started sinking in the Tennessee River, and I had to do a quick safety rescue with Jake. I'm sure he was able to call Jim and get hooked up with him, but the rest of the paddle was pretty isolated, me just kind of catching up to everybody. Man, but the views were just breathtaking, and that made every stroke of that paddle fun, exciting. It did suck with the wind a little bit, but it was just so beautiful and breathtaking. It was incredible. But I'll tell you what, I felt my back muscles and they're still tight. So I'm not back there.
After the first year at C2C, when we had the 42-mile paddle, I had PTSD for at least a year. Anytime anybody talked about paddling, my shoulders started hurting. I mean, Johnny, you just went through the paddle at C2C. How did it compare with that wind?
Yeah, it was similar, honestly. For me, I kind of tend to. Oh, did I sync up?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. Yeah, for me it was very similar to the Open to this year's C2C, and I don't know if you want to grab someone else. I think I keep dropping.
Okay, yeah, you're a little bit staticky. Jason, you were solo. How was that?
It was quite a challenge. I'm used to a 60-pound, 17-foot sea touring kayak as my personal kayak, and so the kayaks we provided were quite different, a lot more
Quite
stable,
different.
quite different. The headwind to me made no sense. I would sit there paddle, water's cresting over my bow, and then all of a sudden it's just glass, and I'm just like, what's going on here? And so I just tried to, grit down and just paddle on through. But it was a breathtaking paddle, probably the most scenic paddle I've ever experienced.
Wow, that's awesome. And I mean, Tim, you brought in a new adventure racer. How was that for both of you? I mean, you hadn't paddled like that for 20 years, unless you got some really good training in before this. How was that for you guys?
Well, we got 1 day of training in, so we borrowed a kayak and went down to a local lake and paddled for 3 hours just to figure out if he could paddle. I knew I could. But then it was just a matter of reading the wind and trying to watch the ripples on the lake or the river and keep moving. So I kind of explained to him that moving forward is the key. So just don't stop, slow down, but don't stop. So and I think he was impressed that we paddled that far, which it was a long way, and it was good. It was a good challenge. It was a good way to start off the race and kind of create a bit of exhaustion and wear out some muscles that usually don't get worn out in my body very often.
Yeah. And then,
Doug, that's one of the things about adventure racing when especially new teams that are looking at this and watching. Paddling is something that you train the least on, period. You love mountain biking, you love running around in the woods, you love going up over mountains and so forth, but the paddling part sucks. Most of it, this is horrible. But for one of the things, you're never going to go out and train in bad weather. You're never going to go train in wind. You go out to the lake and it's windy. Hell, let's just go for a run or something.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that you come out and you go to an adventure race and you're not prepared for wind, waves, current, rain, whatever could be out there, because you don't train in bad weather. Now you can train running in bad weather, biking in bad weather, but there's hell no way you're going to go out on a lake in bad weather. And that's the downfall, is that if it does occur during the race, like C2C and the headwind that we had here, you're completely unprepared. The only thing to do, like Timothy said, put your head down, paddle hard. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, obviously I came from the triathlon world coming over to adventure racing, and I remember, like, when I did my first Ironman race, and you bike all the time, you run all the time, but you rarely swim and then bike after that long, right? And like in a 2.4 mile swim in an Ironman, you were just talking about muscles that you haven't used or didn't use before. Like, if you are working that muscle in your neck in the triathlon, and then now you're getting on the bike and now you're like, man, I can't even look up to see the road because I'm so sore from that swim. Like, those are things that people often are putting together with adventure racing. You start off in a race like this or in C2C where you have a, 6-8 hour paddle, like, and you're not ready for that. When you get on the bike, your arms are jello. You're already like worn out. Your back hurts, like everything hurts. And so, I mean, it does talk a lot about training and preparing for something like this. And I mean, you had the course breakdown in advance of this. So like, I think, in most races, how that preparation begins. So it's something to think about for those of you out there that are thinking about doing an adventure race. And Brad, you guys started on the water as well, right?
Yes, we did. And everybody's seen the movie Dumb and Dumber. That was my teammate and I. We never got in the water. We never paddled. Our paddles were upside down. We were taking long strokes. We weren't in sync. There's videos and pictures of all this.
Were you facing each other? Were you facing each other?
Were we what each other?
Were you facing each other
in the canoe? Because I've seen that.
They had the seat back, so we kind of knew we should be facing forward. But other than that, it was a total shit show. We lost all the time we lost in the paddle. And
that's where you're going to lose a lot of time in this.
But they didn't, because they just muscled through it. And I sent them a couple of pictures of, so they raced against Team Flight, the Oswalds, father and son team, who are very strong, and they were neck and neck until the bike section. I knew Brad and Scott.
For the record, bikers, as you can tell, I don't I'm not a paddler at all.
Yeah, right.
Or
But I sent them pictures, and Susie, my wife, had taken pictures, and it's a picture of Brad and Scott, and they're out of sync, and they're just all over the place. And it says,
paddles are upside.
well, it's, with Matt and Charles Oswald perfectly in sync.
Perfect sync,
pro,
yeah.
And then to them, not so pro, but they muscled through it and pretty much finished neck and neck with Team Flight, and it was all over but the crying after that. So they won the race hands down.
Well, I think, in the water, you just need to be efficient, right? Like, it's not about, it's about having a little bit of power, but really it's technique and efficiency, and it's getting through that without using every muscle in your body to do so. And you guys can probably tell better than I can in this race, but probably towards the end in that last 5 miles, when you had that headwind, even if you would have had a teammate, there was no conversation happening at that point. It was just like we talked about, head down, move forward, get to the end. So you guys get to the end of the paddle, and then you start an amazing bike leg that it looked like a lot of out and backs. So I want to pull up, let's see if I can do this first time doing it. Let's see.
So the Prentice Cooper Wildlife Management Area, while you're pulling that up, is kind of divided by Mullins Creek, which runs down the center of and bisects it. So the west side, which they came in on, is known as the Wild Wild West. So it's ATV, four-wheeler hunting country. The east side's a little more maintained roads. So they pretty much hit the rough start first, which in my course designs, I don't like to paddle. So I make them paddle first, and I make them do the rough stuff first to get it over with. So they definitely hit that first.
Well, so I want to kind of talk about strategy in this section, because there are so many out and backs. The strategy of this section really will come into play, right? Because you actually would go by the TA to get to some of the other points, which is really demoralizing when you're racing, because you're like, I could just stop right here and go on to the next thing. So I'm really interested to hear from you guys how your strategy was going into this, coming off of that long paddle, and kind of let's start, Tim, let's start with you guys. What was your strategy going into this? Did you expect to get things that were over on the east side past the TA? Did you work on that? And what was your team name? I'll pull up your route.
It was Team NCCX. So the pedaling part is
right here.
Basically my favorite part, just because I can pedal fast and hard. So
so you guys hit that section and hit the out and backs, hit everything in that section there. You didn't skip a point in that first bike. Was that your strategy going in?
Well, I hadn't realized that people would actually missed spots and just kept on going. I was just like, I'm just going to hit every spot. So we just kept on going. And then Jim kind of said, Bob, you don't have to hit every spot. And I was like, oh, so kind of changed that strategy a little bit on the biking section, because my teammate was a little tired. But on the biking section, I was like, I'm just going to hit every spot and keep going. The only funny story was, I think it was number 7 or 8, the one that was on the furthest in the not so wild section, which was a little spot, and we got turned around a few times up there in the pitch black.
That'd be in the far northwest there, Doug.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, back in there is, I think, is 7 just below you.
This one right here.
Keep going up, north.
Oh, and the north here.
North. Yeah, keep going. There you go.
That one. 7.
7 was definitely, kind of pro pointy. It was a long way over there, and it was on just an indistinct knoll. I expected only a couple teams to go for it, and only a couple teams did.
We found it quite quickly when we got there, but in the dark, getting back to where we started, I tried to pinpoint stuff, but even with the compass and stuff, we went around twice and ended up back at the same spot. So we literally circumnavigated around twice. We were trying to stay high and not drop off. So,
and you guys that were solos, so Jason and Nick, when you got to these areas, What was your strategy going into it?
My strategy was just to try to get there as quickly as I could, where I had some sunlight. I ended up syncing up with Nick. Well, I ended up seeing Johnny, I think right around CP4. Then I think he got turned around somewhere because I didn't see him for a while. And then I synced up with Nick around CP8. I think that was it. Both of us were looking for the pond. And so I just decided to try to hit those first 4 out and backs just because it was relatively level elevation and just trying to get what I could get on a bike. Because like I said, I'm not the best elevation, especially on a bike.
And so it looks like, so you skipped that pro point that they were just talking about, CP7 out here on the northeast part of the course there. And listen, I talk to people all the time at races about looking for clusters, and it looks like you did exactly that on the bike. Was that your goal? It's like, look, there's 3 that are really close to each other. Let me get those and get done with this.
Yeah, that's what we were at. And right there at that 3 clusters, I had synced up with Nick again. He had, we found the pond together, and then obviously with him being a Chattanooga guy, he passed me going up the incline. But then as we're going to TA2, I see checkpoint 0, and they're already starting the trek. So I really felt that I needed to get what I could get on the bike and quickly get off. But I ended up syncing up with Nick, and we ended up getting those clusters, and we're like, hey, and I was also low on food. So when you're cold, you're hungry, you're getting low on food and water, it's kind of like, do I think about how good I am now or how good I'm going to be when I'm resupplied? That was my strategy.
Hey, Doug, I was curious, both Jason and obviously Nick and Tim, so CP11, which is kind of in the middle of that cluster on the kind of right there, just below you, that one right there. I had kind of laid out the optimal route being kind of riding in there and then just bike whacking down to the main road, which is what checkpoint 0 did. But both of those guys looked like they just went along the road and just hacked up on foot and then came back down. I was just curious if anybody thought about doing the bike whack down from 11 down to the road.
Any takers on bike whacking from 11?
We went from the road and then hiked up.
Yeah. I just figured coming from if you went to the one on the far east, coming across that road, because of the roadbed that goes down to 11 and then just bike whacking to the west. I thought that's what CP0 did. I was just curious what your thought process was on that.
Just going along. I mean, I haven't, it'd been a long time since I'd really done that kind of navigation. So I wasn't really in the mindset of trying to find the fastest route. I was just, okay, what will my teammate be able to do? And that's when I studied the former checkpoint 0.
I'm not even sure if it's the fastest route. I was just kind of curious what your thought, if you saw that there was a potential bike whack and was like, oh, heck no.
We can pull up checkpoint 0's path just to show kind of what they did in that section.
See how they came down from east to west down that road. And the road dies right there at that CP or just above it. So then it's a whack down to the roadbed to the west there. Right, exactly. But it looks like the people that we're talking to here pretty much stayed on the road.
They followed the road all the way down.
They took the road and then just went on foot up to get the checkpoint and back down. I was just curious what the thought, if anybody saw that was a potential bike whack.
It looked like a bushwhack. I just, having studied the winning team's route, I think I looked more for where can I go for a bike ride, because I enjoy biking rather than the quick, because I knew I was be really quick on the bike. So we traveled quickly on the bicycle, but didn't really worry too much about my cross country.
Yeah, no, that makes the most sense. When you say it that way, I was just kind of curious if you saw that opportunity and maybe just poo-pooed it because you didn't want to drag your bike through the weeds.
Well, and I think it's always 6 and 1/2 dozen the other. What you're trying to figure out with a bike whack, right? You're like, I still have to push my bike and hike, and then I got to push my bike back. or is it a place where I can leave my bike, run up and run back down? Johnny, what were your thoughts in this section? I'll pull up your route too.
Yeah, I I ended up having to time hack and dodge that section, mainly because you're talking about the paddle. I capsized my boat mid-river, like towards the last 3 miles of the paddle, and ended up getting really wet and really cold and kind of struggling with getting started. Honestly, I'm normally really strong on paddle and strong on bike. And that first probably 3 hours, 4 hours of the bike leg and that western side of the mountain, man, it took me a long time to get back to where I felt like I was kind of back to myself, if that makes sense. But I did very similar. I did all of the out and backs, went up and went north of the TA. Actually went past the TA, which is very, um, like not fun when you're pedaling up fast and everyone's warm inside.
That's why I said it's
but-
so demoralizing. Like it's like if you run, a triathlon or a running race and you have to run by the finish line and do another loop, and you're like, look at all those happy people over there. And especially with TAs with Warrior, because they're getting fed. They're,
Yep. Well, and one of the things of my strategy, because this was a long solo for me, and I knew that I'm in Savannah, Georgia, so I don't get any mountains unless I'm racing. So I was like, okay. And Jim was nice enough to tell me I was going to hate my life for like the first 2 hours of that entry into that mountain, which was very true. So it was like my strategy was I set time limits on myself, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do 6 hours on the paddle. I'm going to do 8 hours, on this first bike leg. So I pretty much held myself to that time limit. So I bailed as soon as I knew I was not going to, I was getting past that time window, because I wanted to be able to do really good on the trek. And I really was looking forward to legitimate single tracks to work on the next section. So.
Yeah, I think it's tough to kind of weigh that. And especially if you're solo. And Nick, talk about that, because if you're with a team, you can bounce things back and forth about like, hey, what do we have time for? What was our plan? Like, what was our race goal? How was it this time being solo and trying to figure out, do I have time for those things? Do I just go back to the TA here? Like, how was that being a first time solo racer?
Yeah, I would say I was a kind of a mess from the get go. I called a good friend Cody Gagden, who did the C2C race with me and David, and I was like, man, how long do you think this paddle is? It said 21 miles. I was like, how long do you think this paddle is? He's like, 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours. So I started planning food for the paddle. And then from then on, I really didn't have an idea how long it was going to take me to do.
I love your honesty, Nick, because like, I mean, we've all been there, I think. So it's just great to hear.
So I was just kind of winging it from that point on, to be completely honest.
Well, look, and it just shows people out there that you can go out and wing a 30-hour race and and figure it out as you go, right? I mean, we talk about this being a choose your own adventure sport, and you literally get to pick what you get out of it and what you put into it. And I would say maybe logistical planning would be something to think about next time ahead of the race, Nick.
Is that a map hanging from your visor?
This is a famous David Grabner orienteering map that he put together for me.
Oh, okay.
So you prep for those things, but have no idea when you sign up for a 30-hour race what you're going to do.
But usually it's the David thing to plan out. We're going to do it in this time frame. And so I definitely got to see all the impurities of non-planning before the race. And, it's a good reflective time, for preparing for races in the future and what to learn,
Well, no, and I think so, and I forgot to talk about this earlier, but we're going to do a 3-part series here over the next few weeks, probably interrupted with a race report on Blue Ridge. But in that series, we're going to talk about 3 different things that I think are important to all racers, right? So I'm kind of going in reverse order on what we're going to cover. The first one's going to be called leveling up, and it's going to go from being a like 10-hour, 12-hour racer to leveling up to expedition level racing, like going to a C2C, doing a 5-hour, things like that. And how like you've done these things, maybe you've done a 24, maybe now you've done a 30, and now you want to step up and you want to do bigger things and the things that'll go into that. The other thing is teaming up, right? Like for those of you that are solo, how to pick a teammate, how to make sure that your team is divided into things that are your responsibilities and the things that you're doing, and then how to take on those new roles if you step on different teams. Because it's important to know all the roles and be able to fill those things out. So that'll be number 2. And then number 3 is just stepping up. And it's like getting out there and doing your first adventure race and what goes into that. And I mean, we have people here, right? I mean, Brad, you went into your first adventure race. I take it you come from a triathlon background because you're working out. So tell me about that.
Ultra endurance mountain biking and gravel racing and stage mountain bike stage racing, anywhere from 3 to 8 day stage races. So
now do they use GPSs on those, or do you have to be able to find your way?
Preset courses. Now there's a race over in Pisgah that they call where it's kind of a checkpoint as well. But we kind of know the area a little bit, called Pinbar. It's an adventure race, Pisgah Mountain adventure race. And then they do another called Double Dare, which is a 24-hour race.
So how is this getting out on a course with a map and trying to find the points?
So, the biking was, I rode my gravel bike basically the whole course on Wednesday, my mountain bike on Thursdays. I know those trails like the back of my hand. So that was really, really easy. Our big struggle was my teammate was a little tired. Other than that, we actually sat down, spent 5 minutes numbering the checkpoints and literally knew exactly the way we were going. So that part was easy. The other, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, 8 or 9 hours. I've done a lot of those on bikes, which nonstop. So it was kind of nice to be able to sit in a canoe and paddle. And then we do, Jim can tell you, I do a trail running event called Upchuck, which is a 50K. That's got a good bit of, it's in the fall. It's got a good bit of elevation and trail. And so, it wasn't too bad. The paddling was what really wrecked him. I really do a lot of Pilates, so my body was pretty fine with the whole paddling thing. My teammate kind of came off the couch.
Oh yeah, hey, listen, a paddle will wreck anybody if you're not prepared for it. So you guys finished. So that bike was mostly at night, right? It was in the overnight because you finished the paddle roughly right around sunset. Does that sound about right for everybody? And then so you're biking at night. I love biking at night. I like doing any of this stuff at night because I feel like you're so hyper focused because you're only looking at that 15-foot radius around your light and you're not focusing on anything else. You're focused, like we talk about that head down mentality. So were most of you finished with this bike leg and getting onto the trek section at first daylight? Is that? Or
I pretty much like stuck it out for 8 hours. So I was like 6 p.m. to, add 8 hours. It was like around 2 a.m. I think I hit the TA there. Okay. And then I was out within about 30 minutes on the trek. So I was trekking. It was really neat because there's so many really beautiful locations on the trek that were just fun to get to in the dark. But when we got there, I was imagining like, oh man, if the sun was coming up, this would be even better. But then when the sun did come up on some of the overlooks and stuff, and it was just, I mean, you really can't beat the views. It's so stunning.
Well, so Jim shared this trekking section.
I think the last team was out of the bike section or onto the trek by about 5 a.m. So just, everybody was out before dark.
Okay, good. And you posted the trekking section on Adventure Racing discussion group and asked people like without, any routes, what their thought processes were. And I mean, there were you could definitely see where you were getting cliffed out just by looking at the topo. For people at home that are wondering what we're talking about, like the closer together that these little lines are, the steeper that section is. And so there were sections that if you don't hit them correctly, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. You were probably not going to have a very good time and not be able to make it up and over those sections. And so it's, you know, smart to be able to stay on the trail. Mark Latanzi talks about it in squiggly lines, right? Like stay on the trail as much as you can until you don't need to, because not all of us are Jesse Spangler, you know, mountain goats that can just bound up those things. So that strategy, I mean, there were quite a few points in that section. But what was your strategy? Because Jason, I saw yours, and I mean, it's pretty straight line, but I mean, I thought you capitalized on the things, you know, on getting the points that were along that line. And I'll pull up your path so everybody can see that. Was that your strategy going in?
Yeah, that was kind of my strategy, just kind of going along. For our trek section, Nick and I, we started off about 4 a.m. and we decided that, you know, hey, let's stay along this trail. Went all the way down. This is the longest race I've ever done. So I was kind of learning myself as far as how do I think, how do I feel, because we had kind of misjudged our distance between getting to the overlook, and that kind of gave us a lot of confusion. But yeah, we decided just to kind of go along that straight line. And obviously being a flatlander, I didn't know anything about being cliffed out. And what we had thought is coming to the end, and you kind of see where we kind of overshot. And in my mind, I was like, there was a waterfall there, which if you're not paying attention to the contour lines, you're like, oh, I could just follow this all the way down and then boom, hit that road and go straight down. And then Nick and I went over, kind of go over the waterfall, and then we ended up getting cliffed out and had to climb out of that section and then proceed kind of down. So
that'll take up some time.
That was our game plan. Yeah.
That looks like Arthur the King.
Right?
You went to the edge of the cliff and said, "Oh shit! Look down there. We can't get there."
You were just missing Arthur keeping you from going that way.
Yeah, and you know, the first waterfall is only, you know, it was probably 40 feet, and then you look down, and I mean, just seeing all the way down, seeing tops of trees, like, yeah, that's not the way we're gonna go. And then having to go back up and climb back up. And so we got some rock climbing in there as well. And so luckily Nick.
So you and Nick are both just like super fun guys. And I could just imagine that conversation between the two of you at that point when you're at this waterfall and you're like, hey, well, we're here, man. Let's just climb back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
Nick
Jim,
was like,
maybe
man,
in future races, that waterfall could be a rope rappel.
Well, yeah, I tried to get you to do ropes in this thing, but you nixed that. So
I said maybe, and I said next year.
Right. Yeah. So just to for edification and for my, you know, liability waiver, not only in the pre-race meeting did I talk about escarpments and all this stuff explicitly, and I sent you, Doug, the instructions.
You did.
It said there are 2 ways down off this mountain. Do not try any other way. But those young kids, you know, you can't stop them.
Listen, rules are for the weak.
Millennials.
We are adventure racers. We make our own rules, Jim. And yeah, so I mean then when you finally figured that out, then you're like, all right, let's go to the place where I know where I can get down because it's in the instructions. I'll go there, I'll figure it out, and we'll go down. Johnny, I want to pull up yours. Well, actually, hold on, Tim, I want to pull up you guys's, because you talked about really liking the mountain biking and wanting to go after, you know, all the points there. How did you attack? Golly, sorry, I'm going in and out here. How did you attack the trek?
My strategy was to basically, we had it all plotted out to go to every single one of them. And then I just decided based on how fast we were moving and where I felt like we would be too slow as to where we made adaptation changes. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to miss that one because we're not going to make it in the time frame we have. And by that time, I'd realized that not everyone hits every single checkpoint like in some of the other races I'd done. So usually you couldn't, in the past, you couldn't move from checkpoint to checkpoint, but this Rogaine style was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
And
So,
you skipped 4, but I think they were strategic. I mean, these
they were,
two were over
yes,
on the other side of an up and down, right?
So I picked I picked the ones I missed, and based on where we were going and knowing how fast we were moving, so I'm pretty good with time. So when it comes down to how fast we can move and what we have left to do,
and then it looks like you prioritize the last bike, and I mean, because you're going to be much faster on the bike than you were on the trek, so that was a smart move there. So most of you guys, so first of all, I want to know if this section right here, where in the instructions it says that it is a bushwhackable down to the finish, was it indeed bushwhackable?
It was. I think that the when you're tired, especially, reading back over after you've been up for a little while, and you read there's a road. Road is a pretty loose interpretation. So there was about a 5 or 6 foot wide kind of old road that went down about 200 feet, and then it just disappeared. So like I was really fortunate because as a solo, I spent the first like 15, pretty much all the way up until the TA leading out onto the trek by myself, which is always great to, be in the hurt locker and just, talking to yourself. And then on the trek, I met up with the Wisconsin team, the Green Bay team, and Tim and Liz and them, and they were great because it was like an uplift of energy. So we were in kind of in mountain goat mode and moving fast. So by the time we did a lot of really good checkpoints, and by the time we got there to come down that pass, we were all in really good spirits, and so that really helped. But I was messing with the team because I was like, Jim told us this is a road, and as soon as I got on there, it just kind of like disappeared.
So
Well, I
in
think
my defense, if you read the instructions, it says follow old road bed, not road, old road bed, which it was there. It was a road bed. So anyway.
Well, and I think, it's a good thing to remember when you're doing adventure races that every race director or race designer has their own kind of dictionary of terms. A knoll is very different. A reentrant can be anything from this big to this big. And, a passable road is very subjective, I think.
As we discussed earlier, I just didn't want to discourage people from doing those southern checkpoints. That was the main thing. You can get down. It wasn't as easy as probably I alluded to, but you can get down.
I think things are never as easy as race designers allude to them as. But so we get to the last biking section that was.
Well, Jim should tell you how creative he was. Tell him how you got those people across the river.
Oh yeah,
I did see some awesome pictures.
So if you don't mind, just real quick, one thing, and Jeff and I have discussed this. I'm kind of an old school adventure racer, and there are a lot of people. Maybe I'm just trying to recreate my youth or something like that. But I designed this course to be doable by anybody with any basic fitness. There's a lot of short course or taking the short way around options. But I also wanted it to be challenging for the kind of old school adventure racers, even use scan topos and everything else like that. So this was only one team cleared at checkpoint 0. They're old school racers. So, I think I accomplished that. And that trek was meant to be a difficult, if you wanted to clear it, a challenging course. That was what the intention was. But you could just go straight down and, get a few checkpoints on the way and have a good time. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to throw that out. So Prentice Cooper and is across the river on the north side. Sorry. Hey, Susie. Sorry, I was banging stuff around. Is on the north side of the river. Chattanooga proper is on the south side. The only way across are bridges 12 miles in either direction down busy roads. So we got to get them across the river. We couldn't get boats down there because it's a single lane road all the way down. So long story short, I originally was going to have boats being shuttled across like canoes, and they'd paddle across. My neighbor Emily and my neighbor Chad. My neighbor Emily has a ski boat. My neighbor Chad has has a whitewater raft. So we combined the two, and essentially Emily drove the boat across. Her boyfriend was in the whitewater raft, and she would slingshot him into the shoreline, and they'd throw a rope. Don would throw a rope out to the people on shore. They'd grab it, pull it in. They'd jump in the boat. She'd pull them across the river and slingshot them into the boat ramp, and they got off. So that was our river shuttle service, and it worked out quite well. We had a few stags, but we got everybody across the river.
That's fantastic. And I mean, look, that has to be a nice little reprieve after you've hustled down from this long trek to just be able to sit and relax and still be moving, right? Like that's the key with adventure racing. Anytime that you can relax and still be moving forward along the course. So I appreciate that. So you get into the last bike section, and I think a lot of people were starting to run out of time in this section and had to kind of cut some of the things that I think maybe they had planned going, because that trek was pretty long and it had been a long day. So, but Tim, you guys were able to crush all of that bike leg, right?
We got almost all of them. We just missed one towards the end, and that was just time management. And realized that we would have to go down and up, because I stayed on all the mountain bike trails rather than drop off and go around, because I want to ride the mountain bike trails more than the roads. I've never ridden there before, so that was my priority, was to ride as much of the mountain biking as possible. But that did take up more time than using the road system. So I kind of calculated that I really needed to miss this one and continue on down to make the time cutoff.
Well, you got your money's worth, because you finished with like 7 minutes left at the end of the race. So you definitely, milked as much out of it as you could. For the rest of you that were, obviously you guys were solos, but kind of working together at times. Did you guys link back up at any of this? Were you riding together and figuring out like, man, this is how much time we have, we got to get back?
Yeah, Jason and I did. I kind of went down an interesting route off the mountain there to cross the river. Jason and I leaped back up, and we pedaled up that mountain to Raccoon Mountain together, and then bombed that hill and made it back to downtown and did the rest of the checkpoints on the way back.
So you didn't get to do any of the like single track stuff around Raccoon Mountain?
Yeah, but we were too late on that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, time management is a skill that is acquired over the years with adventure racing. Brad, you guys won the 10-hour. How was it going into the finish for you guys?
You mean
did
as
you know
far
where
as
you stood, by the way?
we felt like we were doing okay, just because when we got I think a couple of checkpoints in on the mountain bike, we got on some single track and kind of gapped the team number 2 behind us pretty quickly on single tracks. Like, well, we have a little bit better, I guess, bike handling, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to them, but I mean, we dropped them pretty fast, and then we got the checkpoint along the power lines, or like we got that and out of there and never saw them. So we were like, and then we knew that if we got all of them, we should be okay. We didn't know we were an hour and a half ahead of them, but we felt like we were ahead of them.
If you look at results of mountain bike races, and especially in the Southeast and even nationally and internationally, you'll see Brad on the top podium a lot. So there was, like I said, once they came in together with Team Flight onto that last bike, it was all over but the crying.
Nice.
The funny thing is we stopped at we were at Odell's, which is in Lookout Valley, and my teammate was completely obliterated. I had to go in the store and buy him 2 pieces of pizza and he sat out front on the ground, basically crying. And we gotta go. I said, they might catch us. And so finally he got up, and
Brad ran him into the dirt, and he had to go get convenience store pizza to revive himself.
Did anybody else get to stop for pizza? Because I mean, this is my kind of, it sounded like my kind of race, if that's the case.
If you know Scott, aka Sugar, this is not like the first time he's done this. So yeah.
He's off the couch on everything he does, and he's like half my age, but he was going. He was going. I'm a diesel engine. I can go forever. I just can't go that fast. And he
he was going really hard. He's the best, one of the best bike handlers in Chattanooga. So
Yeah,
he
agreed.
did great.
You
It
can make up
just
for
his-
a lot when you can do that. Yeah.
Oh, it's
Totally. There's a picture of them, Audrey, our photographer, took that I posted today on, by the way, the Chattanooga Epic Adventure Race Facebook page. You can see all that stuff, and as well as the Warrior Adventure Race page. But there's a picture of both Brad and Scott on single track with their hands up in the air. This is
I
the
did
kind
see
of,
that
bike
picture,
handlers
actually,
they
yeah.
are. So yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Well, and so you three solos, you ended up finishing first, second, and third solo, right? Which that's a pretty big thing to have all three of you on here. As we're finishing up, because we got about 5 or 6 minutes left, I want you to touch on like what your highest point is in this race, because I know in this distance of a race, in this time of race, like there's a lot of things that go, can go bad. There's a lot of things that go good, and we've talked about some of the scenery and stuff. Give me your, like, this is why I'm going to come back and do this race again. Johnny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, everybody has bad races or bad whatever, and I had a not a fun start with my body and just the cold and getting wet and swimming. So like 15 hours in, I felt like a completely new, fresh person, and so that was really cool to see. That adage that whatever you feel like, it's going to pass. And so coming out of the trek section, loved the trek. It was really fun. But just knowing that I was finally going to get some single track. So when I got to the top, I did as much as I could. And I think I got 6 or 7 checkpoints up top, or 6 checkpoints up top. And I had a blast. I mean, I don't get single track. I don't get anything cool around Savannah. So I am convinced that the Black Diamond just means that we're going to throw every boulder on the mountain in front of you. But with all of that said, I met up with some really good teams. And it was like the high of highs for me was just, even though I was wiped out, was being able to get on some really cool single track and then, head back to the finish with plenty of time. So
nice. Jason?
Probably for me, it was just, also being a flatlander from the Myrtle Beach area, just having the scenery. It was just kind of like, it's just something that I'm just not used to. You paddle, the rivers I paddle is, straight and narrow. Everything I bike is straight and narrow, but just kind of coming over a ridge and seeing the overlooks was just breathtaking. And so that was probably one of the highlights of this race, just to have that and have it really in the Southeast, relatively close, perfect timing. I'm a school teacher. It was my spring break, so it couldn't have worked out better.
Nice. Tim, what about you guys?
I think the great thing was it was a good race for a newbie, in the sense that my teammate had never done anything like that. And it was fun to get back into racing at a fun level, and relearn some of my skills, and realize that there's a few things that need to perfect, or at least understand the ruling a bit. So there was certain things I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, but like too late.
So should we expect to see you out on other courses?
I'm sure I'll go out and do some more. Yeah, I mean, especially if Lucas wants to do it, and I mean, there's probably a third teammate, female teammate somewhere that wants to join us. So
We can hook you up.
I know, right? Hey,
it was
Brad, what about you guys? I mean, winning the 10 hour, will you be back to defend your title next year?
great kids.
Sorry, I had to take it off mute. Yeah. So we had a lot. I mean, yeah, it's funny. So I'm in a pretty big bike group. A lot of pretty decent racers, and what we want to do next year is kind of put some teams together that would be equally matched and see who the best man is. We probably
do it.
And
Bring 'em out.
Farmer knows.
Warrior's got plenty of room
Yeah.
for your whole squad.
Farmer knows. Yeah, Farmer knows exactly what I'm talking about, and we're extremely competitive. And it would be a lot of, yeah, so we'll definitely be back. We might have to draw teams so that we make it equal. Because there's probably about 8 of us that want to do it now.
Nice. And
Yeah,
Nick, I mean,
if the motor mile racing folks get involved in AR Georgia Adventure Racing, there's your top teams for the next couple of years. I guarantee.
Yeah, next year it'll only be by 5 miles of biking.
Yeah.
Hey, what's funny? That is it? I'm on mute. Yeah, what's funny? It doesn't matter. I mean, we're so we compete at everything we do. So
They can play checkers and still be just.
we
killing
compete
it.
that. I mean, we compete on drinking beer, racing bikes. You got that. We all do that at the upchuck. That it's and I don't run. I'm 56 years old. I'm not a runner, and I run this and try to beat. And we're all racing each other.
Nice.
And we're typically 3 to 4 of us are top 10 every year. So,
and so Nick, this was your first solo. Will you be back solo or will you be back as a team next year?
Probably a little bit of both.
All right. I don't know if that's going to work if you could do both, but
Well, like separate races. I don't know if you talking about just the Chattanooga Epic.
well, so no, I mean, like, look, you can go to Hogback, you could run one as a team and then one as a solo, right? Like on back-to-back days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and Jim, what are your last parting thoughts about this area? We talked about the Facebook pages. You talked about the beautiful course. What was your highlight for the weekend?
Really seeing checkpoint 0, number 1 show up, and number 2 clear the course. Again, I'm really trying to build this race. You know, Jeff does a great job with the middle of the pack to the back of the pack, you know, racers, and keeping everybody, you know, happy and content with that. I'm really hoping to try to draw some of the, you know, top teams, bigger, you know, competitive teams to be able to, you know, come and find a challenging course, which we have so much, such a big playground to do that in. I'm already in the throes of the 2025 planning stages, and it'll be just as epic, just as challenging for the top teams, but also just as fun for everybody else who just wants to come out and have the adventure. There will always be single track mountain biking in my races, but like this year, you could skip all of it. You could just avoid, it was just a loop that you could completely avoid if you wanted to. So you can pick and choose the pieces and parts that you know, enjoy or are good at, and do those, but there will be some scenic overlooks, there'll be waterfalls. We are very blessed here in Chattanooga with all that. And that will be on full display again next year in a completely different part of the Chattanooga area.
Well, you told me that the only way you were coming on tonight is if I promise to come out next year. So I will have to talk to my wife, but that will be one of the races that I will put on the calendar.
I think
Jeff,
everybody
do you
was
have
telling
any?
you there's a reason, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, do you have any last words?
Sure. I mean, I'm thrilled that, you know, in 2019, the city of Chattanooga saw Eco Challenge, and they reached out to me about bringing an event to Chattanooga. And of course, I knew Jim Farmer right away and said, "All right, here's my designer." And you know that this race was supposed to go off in 2020, but obviously COVID hit. It got delayed all the way till 23. So I'm pretty glad that it's come now. It's going to be a staple event. It'll continue to grow. We have so much more land that we can use for this race. So many different areas that we can explore. And I'm excited the fact that Jim is going to stay on for another year. He didn't tell me he was. He just did right now. So that's great.
He's
so
in. He's in.
I
Check
love
out.
it because he did 90% of the work and I slept a lot. So that was great.
We try to keep Jeff asleep. Keep him out of the way. That's my favorite Jeff, sleeping Jeff.
Sleeping Jeff.
Well, guys, listen, I want to thank you guys for coming on here tonight, taking a little bit out of your time to tell us about this amazing course. For those of you that were watching at home, I hope that you enjoyed the dot watching for the 30 and the 10. I hope that you'll follow AR.Watch on Facebook and Instagram, follow Warrior Races for more. Like I said, we're going to be doing a 3-part series in basically in kind of reverse order. We're going to talk about leveling up, stepping up to expedition races, teaming up, going from a solo, or selecting teammates to race with, because it is vital. I'm telling you, if you've ever done a race with bad teammates, you will not want to do that again. So we're going to talk about that and selecting those things. And then the last thing is, for those of you out there that are watching this because your family was doing it or you've thought about doing adventure racing, the last part is called stepping up. And it's going to be about getting started in adventure racing. It's going to talk you through the things that you need to know and the things that you need to have. Like, there are certain things that you need to do out here, or you could just come out and wing it like Nick did and do your first 30-hour race. But thank you guys for following along. Hope you'll continue to follow us on Warrior and AR.Watch, and please continue to get out there and live the adventure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. That was awesome.
Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All right, later.
We'll see you at the next one. You guys better be at C2C.
No.